I spent 50 years breaking my back so my son could have everything I never did. And tonight, in his $1 million mansion, I discovered that my life's work meant absolutely nothing. You're poor to the bone, Dorothy. All your life, you've only known how to scrub floors and wash dishes. Jessica, my daughter in law, slammed her silver spoon against the marble dining table, the sharp clang echoing through their pristine dining room like a gunshot. Her perfectly manicured finger pointed straight at my weathered face. Now that we're wealthy, don't you dare dream of enjoying any of it. In this world, only money talks. Your so called sacrifice raising him means nothing to anyone. The crystal chandelier above cast harsh shadows across the room as 20 pairs of eyes. Their wealthy friends, business partners, family all turned to stare at me. The silence was deafening, except for the soft ticking of their $10,000 grandfather clock. I felt the heat rise to my cheeks, my calloused hands trembling in my lap as I sat there in my old Walmart dress, surrounded by designer gowns and tailored suits. My son Michael, the boy I'd worked 3 jobs to put through college, the child I'd gone without meals to feed, sat frozen in his leather chair, his eyes fixed on his plate. Not a word, not even a glance in my direction. I I just wanted to share a story about when Michael was little, I whispered, my voice barely audible over the humming of their wine refrigerator. Jessica's laugh was sharp as broken glass. Nobody wants to hear about your pathetic, poor life, old woman. This is a sophisticated dinner party, not some trailer park reunion. The woman next to me, Mrs. Henderson from Michael's Country Club, shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her diamond bracelet catching the light as she reached for her wine glass. She knew. They all knew this was wrong. But money buys silence, and my son had plenty of both. I am Dorothy Miller. I'm 79 years old, and I've been a fool. For half a century, I scrubbed office buildings at night and took in laundry during the day. I wore shoes with holes in them so Michael could have new sneakers. I ate peanut butter sandwiches for dinner so he could have hot meals. I gave up my dreams, my youth, my health, everything, so my only child could escape the poverty that had chained our family for generations. And tonight, sitting in his mansion that cost more than I'd made in my entire lifetime, I realized I'd raised a stranger. The grandfather clock chimed 9 times, each toll feeling like a nail in a coffin. My coffin. The coffin of a mother's love that had just been declared worthless by the very people who'd benefited most from it. But this story isn't about how they broke me. It's about how I learned to fight back. It wasn't always like this. There was a time when Michael looked at me like I hung the moon and stars. I was 19 when I married his father, Tommy Miller, a mechanic with grease-stained hands and the biggest heart in Dallas County. We lived in a 2-bedroom trailer on the outskirts of town, but we were rich in love and dreams. Tommy would come home exhausted from the garage, oil under his fingernails, but he'd still lift me off my feet and spin me around our tiny kitchen. One day, Dot, he'd whisper against my hair, "We're gonna give our kids everything we never had." Michael came when I was 22. The moment they placed that wrinkled, crying baby in my arms, I knew my life had found its purpose. Tommy cried harder than the baby did, his rough hand so gentle as he traced Michael's tiny fingers. "He's gonna be somebody important," Tommy said, voice thick with emotion. "College educated, professional, never gonna know what it's like to worry about money." But life had other plans. Michael was only 7 when the 18-wheeler ran the red light. One moment, Tommy was coming home with a bag of groceries and a toy truck for his son. The next moment, I was a widow with a funeral bill I couldn't afford and a little boy asking why Daddy wouldn't wake up. The insurance barely covered the burial. I had no college degree, no special skills, nothing but a fierce determination that my son would have better. So I did what poor women have always done. I worked and worked and worked some more. I cleaned office buildings from midnight to 6 a.m., then came home to get Michael ready for school. While he was in class, I took in ironing from the wealthy neighborhood across town. After he went to bed, I'd sit at our wobbly kitchen table, mending clothes for extra dollars, my eyes burning under our single lamp. Michael never knew we were poor. Not really. I made sure of that. When his shoes got holes, I'd stuff cardboard inside and buy him new ones, even if it meant I ate ramen noodles for a week. When his class took field trips, I'd work double shifts to pay for them. When he wanted to join Little League, I sold my wedding ring, the only valuable thing I owned, to buy his equipment. Mom, why do you work so much? He'd ask sometimes, looking up at me with those big brown eyes that reminded me so much of his father. Because you're worth it, baby, I'd tell him, kissing his forehead. You're gonna make something of yourself. You're gonna make your daddy proud. And he did. Straight A's through high school. Full scholarship to University of Texas. Business degree with honors. I sat in that graduation audience, wearing my one good dress that I'd worn to every special occasion for 15 years, crying tears of pure joy as they called his name. Michael Miller, Bachelor of Business Administration, summa cum laude. My boy had made it. But somewhere between his first corporate job and his second promotion, between his starter apartment and his luxury condo, something changed. The calls got shorter. The visits got rarer. And when he met Jessica, blonde, beautiful, and from the kind of family that had trust funds instead of dreams, I became an inconvenience. Still, when he bought the mansion, I thought maybe we could be close again. Maybe his success could bring us together instead of pulling us apart. How wrong I was. The first red flag should have been the house tour. Welcome to our home, Dorothy, Jessica said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness as she led me through their marble foyer. Her heels clicked against the floor like a metronome counting down to my doom. I do hope you'll be comfortable in your new accommodations. The house was stunning. 6,000 square feet of perfection that belonged in a magazine. Crystal chandeliers, Italian leather furniture, original artwork on the walls. Everything I dreamed Michael would have someday, back when I was counting quarters for his school lunch money. It's beautiful, I breathed, running my weathered hand along the polished banister of their grand staircase. Jessica's smile tightened. Please don't touch the railings. They're imported mahogany, very expensive. We have a cleaning lady for that. The tour continued, each room more luxurious than the last. The kitchen had granite countertops that probably cost more than my entire trailer. The living room boasted a flat-screen TV larger than my bedroom wall. But with each "don't touch this" and "be careful with that," the walls felt like they were closing in. And this, Jessica announced with theatrical flair, opening a door at the end of a narrow hallway, is your room. I stepped inside and felt my heart sink. It was tiny, smaller than Michael's childhood bedroom in our trailer. No windows, just a small bed, a dresser with a cracked mirror, and a musty smell that suggested it had been used for storage until recently. It's cozy, I managed, setting down my single suitcase. It's adequate? Jessica corrected. Michael wanted to put you in the guest house, but I thought you'd prefer to be closer to family. The guest house. Through the window of the main living room, I'd seen it. A charming cottage with flower boxes and big windows. Apparently, that was where they kept their lawn equipment now. Now, let's discuss some house rules, Jessica continued, pulling out her iPhone and scrolling through what looked like a prepared list. Breakfast is at 8 sharp. You can join us, but please keep conversation to a minimum. Michael needs to focus before work. The formal living room and dining room are off limits unless we have company. The leather furniture in the family room is, well, perhaps you'd be more comfortable in the breakfast nook. Each rule felt like a small slap. Don't use the good towels. Don't touch the thermostat. Don't rearrange anything. Don't cook without permission. The kitchen is very delicate, and we can't have any accidents. Of course, I said quietly, feeling smaller with each word. I don't want to be any trouble. Oh, you won't be, Jessica smiled, but it never reached her eyes. I'm sure we'll all get along just fine, as long as everyone knows their place. That first week, I tried so hard to fit in. I woke up early to make Michael his favorite breakfast, the blueberry pancakes I'd perfected during his childhood, the ones he used to say were better than any restaurant. I found him in the kitchen, already dressed in his expensive suit, gulping down a protein shake. Morning, sweetheart, I said, kissing his cheek. I made your favorites. He paused, looking at the stack of golden pancakes, and for a moment, I saw my little boy again. But then Jessica appeared, her silk robe flowing behind her like armor. Oh, Dorothy, how thoughtful. She examined the pancakes like they were contaminated. But Michael's on a very strict diet now. His personal trainer would have a fit. Perhaps next time, check with me first? She scraped the entire batch into the garbage disposal, right in front of me. The sound of the blades grinding up my love was deafening. It's okay, Mom, Michael said, not meeting my eyes. Jessica's right. I need to watch my carbs. I spent the rest of that morning in my little room, staring at the cracked mirror and wondering when my son had learned to throw away everything I'd ever given him. But that was just the beginning. The next blow came when I tried to unpack my few precious belongings. I had a small framed photo of Tommy in his army uniform taken right before Michael was born. I placed it on the dresser in my room, next to the ceramic angel Michael had made me in third grade. 20 minutes later, Jessica appeared in my doorway. I'm sorry, but we can't have personal items displayed. It affects the home's aesthetic. There's a drawer you can use for storage. Storage? My husband's memory, relegated to a drawer like old socks. That's when I began to understand. This wasn't about house rules or aesthetics or even money. This was about erasing me, making me invisible, turning me into a ghost in my own son's life. But I wasn't dead yet. The humiliations came like waves, each one stronger than the last. It started with the sofa incident. I'd been living there 3 weeks when I made the mistake of sitting on their Italian leather sectional to watch the evening news. I was exhausted from helping their housekeeper, unpaid, of course, clean the house for one of Michael's business dinners. Dorothy! Jessica's voice cut through the room like a whip. What are you doing? I looked up, confused. I was just That sofa cost $28,000. Your clothing might stain the leather. She gestured dismissively at my simple cotton dress, the same one I'd worn to Michael's graduation. There's a perfectly good chair in the breakfast nook. The breakfast nook. A plastic chair at a folding table where they kept the mail and dog bowls. That's where the mother who raised their breadwinner was supposed to sit. Michael walked in as I was moving to my assigned spot. He saw everything, his wife treating his mother like hired help, me shuffling to the corner like a scolded child. He looked at me for one long moment. Then he turned on the golf channel and said nothing. The dinner parties were worse. "We're having some important clients over tonight," Jessica announced one Thursday morning. "It would be best if you made yourself scarce. Perhaps you could visit the library or take a long walk." I understood. I was an embarrassment. A poor old woman who didn't fit their carefully crafted image of success. But I was also curious. So I hid in the kitchen, watching through the service window as they entertained. Jessica wore a dress that cost more than I'd made in 6 months. Michael laughed at jokes that weren't funny, desperate to impress men in suits who looked at him like he was still the poor kid from the trailer park, no matter how much money he made now. "Your mother seems charming," I heard one woman say to Michael. "Very authentic." Jessica's laugh was ice cold. "Oh, Dorothy's been such a help. She has so much experience with practical things, cleaning, ironing. It's amazing what you learn when you come from humble beginnings." The words humble beginnings dripped with condescension. My entire life, the sacrifice, the love, the backbreaking work, reduced to quaint poverty for their entertainment. That's when I heard Michael's response, and it shattered something inside me that I didn't know could still break. Yes, well, Mom did what she had to do. We all rise above our circumstances eventually. Rise above, like I was something to escape from, like loving him was holding him back. The financial control came next. "Dorothy, we need to discuss your situation," Jessica said one morning, sliding a piece of paper across their marble kitchen island. "This is a budget for your personal expenses. Michael and I have been very generous, but there need to be limits." I looked at the paper. $10 a week for personal items, $20 monthly for miscellaneous expenses, like an allowance for a child, not a woman who'd raise the man paying for it all. "I don't understand," I said. "I haven't asked for anything." "That coffee you bought last week, the stamp for your letter to Mrs. Rodriguez next door. These things add up." Jessica's manicured finger tapped the paper impatiently. "We can't have you thinking you can just spend freely." Mrs. Rodriguez was 91 and had been my friend since Michael was small. The letter was a birthday card that cost me 67 cents. I'd asked permission to buy the stamp, but the cruelest cut came when I got sick. It was just a cold, but at 79, a cold can become something serious quickly. I spent 3 days in my windowless room, barely able to get up for water. No one checked on me. No one brought me soup or asked if I needed medicine. On the fourth day, I stumbled to the kitchen for tea and found Jessica on the phone with someone, her back to me. Honestly, I don't know how much longer we can do this. She's becoming more of a burden every day. Maybe it's time to start looking at other options. Other options. I knew what that meant. The place where inconvenient old people go to disappear. That night, I lay in my narrow bed and listened to them laughing downstairs at some comedy show. The sound drifted up through the vents like mockery. I thought about Tommy, about how he'd promised me we'd never let anyone treat our family like garbage. I'd kept that promise for Michael. I'd worked myself to the bone, sacrificed everything, given him every advantage my love could buy. And now, I was garbage to be disposed of. But garbage has a way of piling up until someone has to deal with it. And I was about to become a very big problem. The night that changed everything was Michael's birthday, his 35th. I'd been planning for weeks, secretly saving quarters from my meager allowance to buy ingredients for his favorite childhood cake, the double chocolate fudge recipe I'd perfected when we could barely afford cocoa powder. It had taken me 3 months to save the $18 for the ingredients, skipping my own small luxuries, eating less, so I could give him this one precious gift. I woke up at 5 a.m. to start baking, creeping into their pristine kitchen like a thief in my own son's house. For 4 hours, I poured my heart into that cake. Every measurement was perfect, every layer exactly as he remembered. I even managed to find candles, 35 of them, arranged in the shape of a heart. When Michael came down for breakfast, his face lit up like he was 7 years old again. Mom, you made my cake. For the first time in months, he hugged me. Really hugged me. Not the stiff, obligatory embrace I'd grown used to. I can't believe you remembered. I remember everything about you, sweetheart, I whispered into his shoulder, breathing in the scent of my child, my heart full to bursting. That's when Jessica walked in. She took one look at the cake, at Michael's joy, at my flour-dusted apron, and her face turned to stone. "What is this mess?" she hissed, surveying the kitchen. I'd cleaned as I went, but there were still mixing bowls in the sink, a light dusting of flour on the counter. "Jessica, look. Mom made my birthday cake, just like when I was little." Michael's voice was full of wonder, like he'd forgotten what it felt like to receive something made with love instead of bought with money. How quaint. Jessica's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "But we already ordered a cake from Le Bernardin. Cost $300. This homemade thing really isn't necessary." "But I want Mom's cake," Michael said, and my heart soared. "Remember, Jess? I told you about these cakes, how she'd save up for weeks just to make them for me." Jessica's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Michael, darling, we're having your colleagues over tonight. Important people. We can't serve them some amateur baking project." The words hit me like physical blows, but I stayed quiet. This was between my son and his wife. "It's my birthday," Michael said, his voice getting stronger, "and I want my mother's cake." For a moment, I thought I'd won. I thought love would triumph over appearances, that my son would choose the mother who'd sacrificed everything over the woman who had given him nothing but demands. I was wrong. Jessica smiled sweetly and walked over to my beautiful cake. Without warning, she picked it up with both hands and threw it directly into the garbage disposal. The sound of my love being ground to pieces filled the kitchen. "Oops," she said, her voice dripping with false innocence. "How clumsy of me." I stood there, stunned, watching chocolate crumbs and frosting disappear down the drain. 4 hours of work, 3 months of saving, 35 years of birthday traditions, all destroyed in seconds. "Jessica," Michael's voice was sharp. "That was an accident," she finished smoothly. "Besides, now you can enjoy the professional cake like a proper adult. Really, Michael." When are you going to stop letting your mother baby you? That's when she turned to me, and I saw something in her eyes that chilled me to the bone, pure hatred. And you, she snarled, dropping all pretense of civility. You pathetic old woman. Do you really think your little domestic performances matter? Do you think anyone cares about your sentimental garbage? My hands were shaking. I I just wanted to make him happy. You want to make him happy? Then disappear. You're poor, Dorothy. Poor in your bones, in your blood, in your very soul. You have nothing to offer except reminders of where he came from. And trust me, no one wants to remember that trailer park. The kitchen fell silent except for the garbage disposal still grinding. You're right about one thing, I said quietly, my voice steadier than I felt. I am poor. I've been poor my whole life. Jessica smirked, thinking she'd won. But you know what I'm not? I continued, looking her straight in the eyes. I'm not cruel. I'm not heartless. And I'm not done. I walked to my tiny room and pulled out the shoebox I kept under my bed. Inside were all the documents of my sacrifice. Every Parent Plus loan, every overtime slip, every receipt for Michael's clothes and food and school supplies that I'd bought instead of buying things for myself. I also pulled out the letter, the one I'd written but never sent, the one addressed to the State Bar of Texas, detailing how a successful lawyer had abandoned his elderly mother, violated elder care laws, and committed financial abuse. I'd never planned to use it. I'd written it in a moment of despair and weakness. But Jessica had just made it my weapon. As I sealed the envelope, I could hear them arguing in the kitchen. Michael's voice was raised, Jessica's was sharp and defensive. They were fighting about me, but not the way I'd once hoped. They were fighting about how to get rid of me faster. Well, I was about to save them the trouble. That night, I sat in my windowless room and made a list. Not a list of grievances or complaints. I was beyond that now. This was a list of facts, cold, hard facts about what Jessica had just revealed to me in her moment of cruelty. She was right. I was poor. I'd always been poor, and I always would be. But poverty had taught me something that wealth never could. How to survive when everyone has written you off. How to fight when you have nothing left to lose. I pulled out my old address book, the one with phone numbers written in different colored pens, as friends moved and changed over the decades. There, in faded blue ink, was the number I needed. Margaret Santos, my friend from the night shift at Downtown General. Maggie had worked cleaning offices like me, but she'd also put herself through paralegal school, one night class at a time. Now she worked for the biggest elder law firm in Dallas. Maggie, my voice cracked when she answered. It's Dorothy Miller. Dot! Honey, how are you? I heard Michael made it big. You must be so proud. I almost laughed at the irony. Actually, Maggie, I need help. Legal help. There was a pause. Then her voice changed, became professional and concerned. What kind of help? I told her everything. The isolation, the financial control, the emotional abuse, the way they were planning to dispose of me like I was nothing. Maggie listened without interrupting, occasionally making small sounds of disgust and outrage. Dot! She said when I finished. What you're describing is textbook elder abuse. Financial, emotional, maybe even a case for intentional infliction of emotional distress. We can fight this. But I don't have money for lawyers. Honey, you don't need money. You need justice. And lucky for you, my boss takes elder abuse cases pro bono. She's got a thing about ungrateful children. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in months. I got dressed in my best outfit, the navy blue dress I'd worn to Michael's college graduation, and I walked out of that house with my head held high. The law office was intimidating, all glass and steel and important looking people in expensive suits. But Maggie met me in the lobby, gave me a hug that reminded me what real affection felt like, and led me to a conference room where I met the woman who would change my life. Attorney Sarah Chen was younger than Michael, but she had the kind of steel in her eyes that comes from fighting battles others are afraid to fight. She listened to my story with growing anger, taking notes and occasionally asking pointed questions. Mrs. Miller, she said when I finished, I want you to understand something very clearly. What your son and daughter in law have done to you is not just morally reprehensible, it's illegal. Texas has some of the strongest elder protection laws in the country, and they violated almost every single one. She slid a document across the table. This is a restraining order. It will prevent them from disposing of your belongings, kicking you out of the house, or controlling your finances without a court order. This, she handed me another paper, is a complaint we're filing with Adult Protective Services. And this, she smiled grimly, is a civil lawsuit for elder abuse and intentional infliction of emotional distress. My hands shook as I looked at the papers. I never wanted it to come to this. I know, honey. But sometimes the people who are supposed to love us need to be reminded that love isn't optional. It's the bare minimum. And when they can't even manage that, the law has to step in. That afternoon, I walked back into Michael's mansion, carrying copies of all three documents, and something else I hadn't felt in months: power. Jessica was in the living room, showing off her latest purchase, a crystal vase that cost more than most people's rent, to some friends from her country club. Ladies, I said, my voice carrying across their perfectly decorated space, I'd like you to meet the real Dorothy Miller. Not the pathetic old woman you've been told about, but the woman who's about to teach your friend here what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. I set the legal documents on their $20,000 coffee table and smiled. Jessica, darling, you said only money talks in this world. Well, my lawyers are about to have a very expensive conversation with you. The crystal vase slipped from Jessica's hands and shattered on their marble floor. It was the most beautiful sound I'd heard in years. The war began immediately. Within an hour of my legal documents hitting their coffee table, Jessica was on the phone with her father's attorney, some corporate shark who charged $1,000 an hour, and war suits that cost more than cars. But Sarah Chen had warned me this would happen. Rich people think money can solve everything, she'd told me. But the law doesn't care about your bank account when you're abusing an elderly person. The restraining order was served that evening. I watched from my bedroom window as a sheriff's deputy handed Michael the papers, right there on his precious circular driveway, in front of all the neighbors who'd seen Jessica parade her perfect life for months. Michael's face went white as he read. Jessica's went red. The shouting started around 8 p.m. "You vindictive old witch!" Jessica's voice carried through the thin walls of my room. "You're trying to destroy us." "Mom, what have you done?" Michael's voice was anguished, confused. "Why are you doing this to us?" I opened my door and walked into their living room, where they stood surrounded by legal papers like a battlefield. Jessica's friends had fled. The crystal vase still lay in glittering pieces on the floor. No one had bothered to clean it up. "I'm not doing anything to you," I said calmly. "I'm doing something for me. For the first time in 35 years, I'm putting myself first." "You're suing your own son," Jessica shrieked. "Your own flesh and blood." "No," I corrected her. "I'm suing two people who have systematically abused, humiliated, and financially exploited an elderly woman. The fact that one of them came from my body doesn't give him the right to treat me like garbage." Michael sank into his expensive leather chair, head in his hands. "Mom, we can work this out. We don't need lawyers." "We tried working it out," I interrupted. "For 6 months. I tried to be the perfect, invisible, grateful old lady you wanted. I ate your insults, accepted your crumbs, and pretended that being treated like a servant in my son's house was somehow normal." Sarah Chen had prepared me for this moment. "They'll try to make you feel guilty," she'd said. "They'll try to make this about family loyalty instead of what it really is: abuse." The next morning brought the first real victory. Adult Protective Services arrived at 9 a.m. sharp. A stern-faced woman named Ms. Rodriguez, who didn't seem impressed by marble countertops or Italian leather furniture. She interviewed me first, documenting every incident of isolation, financial control, and emotional abuse, with the methodical precision of someone who'd seen it all before. Then she interviewed Michael and Jessica separately. I could hear Jessica's voice from the kitchen, high and defensive. "She's lying. We've given her everything: a beautiful room, good food, spending money. $10 a week for a woman who raised your husband?" Miss Rodriguez's voice was ice cold. "In a windowless room smaller than most people's closets? While you live in a 6,000 square foot mansion?" The investigation lasted 3 hours. When it was over, Miss Rodriguez found probable cause for elder abuse and recommended immediate intervention. But the real satisfaction came 2 days later, when Jessica's country club friends got wind of the legal proceedings. I was sitting in the breakfast nook, my assigned spot, when the doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see Margaret Whitmore, the president of Jessica's precious junior league, standing on the front porch with two other impeccably dressed women. Jessica answered the door with her usual fake smile, but I could see the strain around her eyes. "Margaret, how lovely to see you." "Jessica." Margaret's voice was clipped, professional. "We need to talk." They came into the living room, and I shamelessly eavesdropped from the kitchen. "The Junior League has become aware of some disturbing allegations," Margaret began. "Elder abuse is not something we take lightly in our organization." "Those are lies," Jessica said quickly. "Dorothy is confused. Elderly people sometimes imagine. Adult Protective Services doesn't investigate imaginary abuse, Jessica. And frankly, the fact that you just suggested your husband's mother is mentally incompetent is exactly the kind of thing that concerns us." There was a long silence. "I'm afraid we're going to have to suspend your membership pending the resolution of these legal matters," Margaret continued. "We simply cannot have someone under investigation for elder abuse representing our organization." The sound Jessica made was somewhere between a gasp and a wail. But that was nothing compared to what happened when Michael's law firm got involved. Partnership track lawyers can't afford elder abuse scandals. When the managing partners called Michael in for a meeting, I knew his carefully constructed world was finally cracking. He came home that evening looking like he'd aged 10 years in one day. "They've put me on administrative leave," he told Jessica, his voice hollow, "pending the outcome of the investigation." "What does that mean?" Jessica's voice was small, frightened. "It means," I said from my spot in the breakfast nook, "that actions have consequences, even for people who think money makes them untouchable." The revolution had begun. 3 weeks later, I did something I hadn't done in years. I laughed. Really, truly laughed, until my sides hurt and tears streamed down my cheeks. I was sitting in Maggie's backyard, sharing iced tea and watching her grandchildren play on their rusty swing set. The afternoon sun felt warm on my face, and for the first time in months, I wasn't walking on eggshells or measuring my words or trying to make myself invisible. You should have seen Jessica's face when the process server showed up at her yoga class. Maggie chuckled, refilling my glass. Bethany Morrison was there. You remember Bethany from the old neighborhood? She said Jessica turned white as a sheet and tried to hide behind the instructor. "I almost feel sorry for her," I lied, grinning. Almost. The legal proceedings had moved faster than anyone expected. Sarah Chen was ruthless and methodical, documenting every instance of financial abuse, every attempt at isolation, every cruel word and dismissive gesture. The evidence was overwhelming. But more than the legal victories, I was discovering something I'd forgotten existed: my own voice. "Dorothy, you're different," Maggie observed, studying my face. "Stronger. Like the old you is coming back." She was right. For the first time since Tommy died, I wasn't defining myself as Michael's mother, or Jessica's victim, or anyone's burden. I was just Dorothy, 79 years old, poor as church mice, and finally free. The settlement came through on a Tuesday. Sarah Chen called me at Maggie's house, where I was staying until everything was resolved. "Dot, sit down," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "We got everything we asked for and more." The terms were simple and devastating for Jessica and Michael. Full restitution for financial abuse, including compensation for my unpaid housework. Legal fees paid in full. A formal apology to be read in court and published in the local newspaper. And most importantly, a restraining order that would keep them from contacting me unless I initiated it. "There's more," Sarah continued. "Michael's firm has offered to settle their own lawsuit, the one about his fitness to practice law. They're giving him a choice: resign voluntarily with a neutral reference, or face a formal ethics investigation for elder abuse." I closed my eyes, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and sorrow. This wasn't how I'd wanted my son's career to end, but he'd made his choices. "And Jessica?" I asked. "Community service, 200 hours working with elderly residents at the state-run nursing home." The judge thought it would be educational. That evening, I stood in front of the mirror in Maggie's guest room and barely recognized myself. The hunched shoulders were straight again. The fearful expression was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like pride. I thought about calling Michael. The restraining order didn't prevent me from reaching out, only him from contacting me. For a moment, I imagined his voice on the phone, apologizing, begging forgiveness, promising to be the son I'd raised him to be. But then I remembered the sound of my birthday cake being destroyed, the silence when I needed defending, the look in his eyes when I became inconvenient to his perfect life. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. And maybe that's okay. Instead, I called Mrs. Rodriguez, my 91-year-old neighbor from the old days. Mija, she exclaimed when she heard my voice. I was so worried. That fancy son of yours never returned my calls when I tried to reach you. We talked for 2 hours about everything and nothing. Her garden, my legal victory, the weather, the way the old neighborhood was changing. Normal conversation between two old friends, with no one monitoring my words or timing my calls or making me feel guilty for enjoying myself. When I hung up, Maggie found me crying happy tears in her kitchen. You know what we need to do, she said, pulling two wine glasses from her cabinet. We need to celebrate. When's the last time you did something just because you wanted to? I thought about it. I honestly can't remember. Well, then, she said, pouring two generous glasses of cheap red wine. It's about time we fix that. We toasted to new beginnings, to second chances, to the revolutionary idea that even at 79, it's never too late to choose yourself first. For the first time in decades, the future looked bright. 6 months later, I was standing in my new apartment, a modest one-bedroom in a senior-friendly complex, when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw a figure I almost didn't recognize. Michael stood on my doorstep, thinner than I remembered, wearing a simple button-down shirt instead of his usual expensive suits. His face was etched with lines that hadn't been there before. And his eyes? His eyes looked like those of a man who'd lost everything and was just beginning to understand why. I opened the door, but didn't invite him in. Hello, Michael. Mom. His voice cracked on the word. I was hoping we could talk. I studied my son's face, looking for the little boy I'd once known, the teenager I'd been so proud of, the man I'd thought I was raising. He was in there somewhere, buried under years of entitlement and misplaced priorities. You can talk, I said. I'll listen. He looked around my simple living room. Second-hand furniture, family photos on mismatched frames, my old ceramic angel from his third-grade art class prominently displayed on the mantel. It was the opposite of his marble mansion, and, somehow, infinitely warmer. Jessica left me, he said quietly, sinking into my thrift store armchair. She filed for divorce as soon as the legal settlements were final. Took half of everything and moved to California. I felt a flicker of something, not quite satisfaction, but a sense of cosmic justice. I'm sorry, I said, and surprisingly, I meant it. Are you? He looked up at me with genuine curiosity. I wouldn't blame you if you weren't. I poured 2 cups of coffee. Regular coffee in regular mugs, nothing fancy or expensive, and sat across from him on my second-hand couch. I'm sorry because I remember when you were 7 years old and you broke your arm falling off your bike. You cried not because it hurt, but because you were afraid the other kids would make fun of your cast. That little boy didn't deserve to have his heart broken, even if the man he became forgot how to love. Michael stared into his coffee mug like it held answers to questions he was only beginning to ask. I lost my job, he continued. The law firm? They couldn't keep someone with an elder abuse investigation on their books. I'm working at a small practice now, doing divorce cases and traffic violations. The pay is... He laughed bitterly. Well, let's just say I understand now why you saved quarters. I let him talk about losing the house, about the friends who disappeared when the money dried up, about the crushing realization that he'd built his entire identity on things that could be taken away. I keep thinking about that birthday cake, he said suddenly, the one Jessica threw away. I wanted it, Mom. I really wanted it, not because it was expensive or impressive, but because you made it, because it meant something. Why didn't you stop her? I asked the question that had haunted me for months. He was quiet for a long time. Because I was afraid, he admitted finally. Afraid that if I chose you over her, I'd lose the life I thought I wanted. Afraid that loving you meant admitting I came from poverty and I was so desperate to be someone else. And now I know that the only thing worse than being poor is being poor in spirit. And Jessica, she made me poor in every way that matters. We sat in silence, sipping coffee, and listening to the sounds of normal life outside my window. Children playing, neighbors talking, the everyday symphony of people who didn't need marble floors to find contentment. Can you forgive me? He asked finally. I looked at my son, really looked at him. The expensive suits were gone, but so was the arrogance. The mansion was lost, but maybe, just maybe, the little boy I'd raised was finding his way back. I already have, I said. But Michael, forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean going back to the way things were. I know, he nodded. I want to know you again. The real you, not the version Jessica wanted me to see. I reached across and took his hand, the same hand I'd held when he was scared, bandaged when he was hurt, applauded when he graduated. Then let's start with coffee, I said. And this time, we'll both get to talk. Outside my window, the sun was setting over my new life. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't wealthy, but it was mine. And that was worth more than all the marble in the world. If you're watching this video, maybe you see yourself in my story. Maybe you're the mother who sacrificed everything only to be treated like you're nothing. Maybe you're the father who built a life with your bare hands, only to be pushed aside when success arrived. Maybe you're the grandmother whose grandchildren barely know your name because someone decided you weren't worth their time. I want you to understand something that took me 79 years to learn. You are not disposable. Your love is not worthless. Your sacrifices are not mistakes. And being poor in money, in resources, in material things does not make you poor in value. Family is not about blood or obligation or guilt. Real family is about respect. Real family builds bigger tables, not higher walls. Real family doesn't hide you away when company comes. They introduce you with pride. If the people in your life make you feel small, if they treat your love like a burden and your presence like an embarrassment, then they are not your family. They are strangers who happen to share your DNA. You deserve better. At 20, at 50, at 80, you deserve to be treated with dignity. You deserve to have your voice heard. You deserve to take up space in this world without apologizing for existing. Love without respect isn't love. It's manipulation with a pretty bow on top. If my story resonates with you, share it in the comments below. Tell me about your own journey, your own struggles, your own moments of standing up for yourself. We're stronger when we stand together. Hit that subscribe button if you want to hear more stories about ordinary people finding extraordinary courage. Ring the notification bell because everyone deserves to know they're not alone. And remember, it's never too late to choose yourself first. It's never too late to demand better. It's never too late to remember that you matter. Because you do. You always have. And no one, absolutely no one, has the right to make you forget that. Your dignity is not negotiable. Your worth is not up for debate. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is refuse to accept anything less than love in return.